So, we have started what we call the Good Grief Network. And the big aim here is to help normalize the heavy feelings that are associated with ecological destruction and climate change and just these bigger systemic problems that we're all seeing kind of unfolding at the same time. So that's the bigger picture of what we want to do. We want to help normalize these heavier feelings and normalize feeling them, moving through them, so that we don't get caught in despair, eco anxiety, or just inaction in general. We do this in a number of ways. The metabolism of heavy feelings. We do it through our 10-step program, and Aimee's pulling it up right now, so we can read the 10 steps to you. And this has been really fruitful. We've both had in-person meetings and digital meetings, and both seem to be going very well. Obviously, you have to change a few things when you do them digitally versus having people in real life. But we have a few methodologies that we've done a lot of research on. I feel like our group pulls from the best of the best that's out there and tries to put them all together and say, like, our method isn't the only way to go about doing these things. There's Joanna Macy's The Work That Reconnects. There's Carolyn Baker's work with Dean Walker. There's just a lot of resources out there. And what we try to do is make them more available to people. And again, the normalization of these things is incredibly important because our culture tells us that we're not supposed to feel anything but happy. And so if we feel sad or anything sad or despair, then we're doing something wrong. Something's wrong with us. And we want to push back and say, like, no, it's a cultural problem. We need to embrace our full humanity. And as far as things go with what the future looks like, I think that our plan is to help people move through these feelings and live in the present moment, so that no matter what happens in the past, we're prepared and we have an arsenal of tools that we can rely on. And so, whether or not we are undergoing near-term human extinction, or we can pull out some sort of miracle and make it through these really wild times, what we want to do is to have people be resilient and have community and know what it's like to live in the moment and just be the best versions of themselves that they can be. So, did you want to read the yeah, and I mean, we were sitting outside because it was so warm, and I think somebody mentioned, are those trees budding? Like, it's not spring, but the trees they have buds on them. And I think anybody who's paying attention to those kinds of things, that creates some sort of grief, like
because I would say we get a lot of people who are flirting with the doom perspective and are looking for what to do about it. And rather than us try to say, there's for sure hope, this is what you do, we say, here's some tools to look at it a little differently and have some acceptance that maybe that is part of our future. We don't know, it's uncertain. Here's how we work the steps to try to be the best we can be in our present moment and do everything we can, and also know that might not be enough.
So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we focus a lot on being mindful and present in the moment, and not, there has to be a certain amount of future planning, but also not to be so rigidly stuck to the future that we know, because we know that that's not a possibility. We know our imagined ideal future is no longer present. And so what we try to do is get folks to think about, okay, if that's no longer an option, what's the next step? What might that look like for you? And how do we become divorced from this final outcome? How can we live in the present moment with whether or not, and our species might be gone in 50 years or 100 years or 20 years, like, what does it mean to try our best right now and to help wake people up and to love and to be present and to build community and be there for each other? Like, let's use the time that we're given to reinvent what it means to be a human being.
Even as I'm talking about this, I feel a little anxiety stirring in my stomach, because that existential anxiety is real. And so it will always be there, but how do we not let it control how we act now, I guess, is the bigger picture for me.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate what you guys were saying.
Well, and we've been recently talking about how the side of joy, like, pretend there's a coin, one side is joy and one side is sort of grief or despair, and how you can't really have one without the other. And the more grief that you tend to feel and process, because I think that's important, right? We can't just get stuck in the grief. We have to, like your spiritual mentor said, right? Don't try to force it anywhere. Just let it be. Let it run its course. But then on the flip side, the capacity for joy and love and meaning and presence grows deeper too. And so it's this interesting gateway. Grief is a gateway into these feelings of joy and these feelings of meaning and connection. And despair can be that too, like meeting somebody at face value and saying, I feel that too. I feel this powerlessness over what's happening. And I know too about tipping points, and I know about the importance of the permafrost melting and all these things, right? Or the coral reefs bleaching. Like, we're very cognizant of these things that are happening, and yet at the same time, if we allow ourselves to be moved by them, and I'm trying to say like 4 different things at once, but I think it's important too. Our group doesn't prescribe a specific action, and it's because our audience is coming from all different places, and we understand that you have a different strength than I have, and Aimee has a different strength than you have. And so how can we prescribe like, okay, you need to do this in the world now? Instead, what we try to do is break down social constructions and say, what makes you come alive? What makes you be the best version of yourself in this present moment? And we want to help you go do that. And we know, we're connected to a wide variety of groups. And so if you're looking for community within a particular sect of what's happening, we can point you to Extinction Rebellion. We can point you to near-term human extinction groups. We can point you to 350.org. Like, we want you to feel moved in whatever capacity you feel most alive, and go do that. And we can't particularly prescribe that for anyone. But we think it's important to follow that gut feeling, especially right now.
And so luckily, this is kind of an argument that continued for years and years. And the deeper we started going into systemic issues, racism, violence, war, all of these things, you start to see that they all come from this disconnection to self, to others, letting greed and fear dictate our actions, where I believe when people work our steps, it helps wake you up in a way where you go wherever you feel that pull, wherever you feel, because that passion is going to fuel your activism, or maybe people don't identify it as activism. I think I define activism pretty loosely. And so for me, it feels like activism. But whatever it is you go out in the world and you do, I think when people are quiet enough and feel supported enough and brave enough to face the hard things, I think the natural response to that, to a human who feels healthy, is to want to help others and to take that elsewhere. I think all the other stuff gets in the way, and when we get quiet enough, and that's what I believe the steps help people do, is to get quiet enough, because so many of us sit down and we don't even know what we want to do that then the real activism comes. It's no longer the standing on a soapbox and shouting at people. It's no longer my way or no way. It comes into how do we raise up together. And that's why I believe in the work we do. And that's how I believe it's different than a lot of the other activist groups I've been a part of.
Like, we can live with that, the silencing ourselves and trying to build meaning in the moment. And I think that's really what we're trying to do for other people too, is say, like, what, if you were to die tomorrow, how do you want to be living right now? Who do you want to be in this present moment? And so my experience is like, I pursued interdisciplinary studies because that's what spoke to me the most, and ended up going through Terry Tempest Williams' program, Environmental Humanities at the University of Utah. And this allowed me to take psychology classes and sociology classes and use my expertise as an undergrad to put a lot of patterns together, and to say, like, we can use this, method, or we can use this way of thinking to inform this. And I am very influenced by Buddhism, and Buddhism as a way of existing on the planet instead of a religion per se. Buddhism, as you put the lens on and you realize that we're all interconnected, and you realize what I do to Aimee impacts this, and what I do to this natural landscape impacts this, and how nothing lives in a vacuum. And so that's, in short, my path to where I got to be. I don't know if you want to.
I'm flattered that you would ask this question, that you could sense there was something there. My spiritual path has been very tumultuous, but rewarding. I would say that defining moment for me, or kind of what opened my heart to return to spirituality, because I was very closed off and identified as atheist and agnostic, and I know people who identify as those things and are very spiritual, but when I identified as those things, I was not. The thought of such a thing hurt to think about.
Mhm.
Then I lived with retired nuns, which is kind of hard to just drop into a conversation. But in between my undergraduate degree and my graduate degree, I took a year off and was trying to write a book about spirituality and my experience with mental illness. I had a lot of depression in my early
Mhm.
20s, especially. And I knew a poet who also happened to be a nun, and she, just for context, this woman was arrested in the civil rights movement. She drank whiskey with James Baldwin. She is a legend in my mind to this day. And I just casually mentioned to her, did she know of anybody who might house a young writer for free? Well, for a year while I worked on a book. And she got me situated at this retirement home for Catholic nuns. And uh, what happened there still goes beyond words. But what I witnessed there was still some folks who adhered to the very fear-based religion that we kind of stereotype sometimes with Catholicism. But there was those other nuns who lived a contemplative life and had
Mm.
silent grace about them, I would say, and the love they showed me and the care they showed me. I stopped writing about 2 or 3 months into living with them. They still let me live with them for the remainder of the year. I still just painted and walked every day, and that somehow in that silence came something unidentifiable that helped me in grad school when I was having a hard time and not sure if I should stay with my program. Um, a word like faith, which normally would have scared me and I would have shied away from, and that I still use very hesitant. So I want to put a little disclaimer there, but yeah, I have a faith in something, life, light. I don't know what it
Yeah.
is, but
We have just recently started climate conversations slash climate coaching because we realized that through our 10-step program, sometimes that's not individualized enough. And so I want to throw out there that we are not trained mental health professionals, but we are capable of sitting and, listening and holding space. And so we feel very strongly about this capability to sit with people in their despair and to help motivate them to sort of find this gratitude that we've been speaking about. And so this is a new adventure for us. We're very excited, a little scared, but we're just really passionate about sitting with people and helping transform their lives so that they can live the best way that they can with whatever time we have left. Who understands these kinds of things? But also we do have a capacity to sit and listen, and we have a tremendous amount of resources that we've been collecting through the years. And so we want to be the kind of people who can connect and connect in all ways with
Yeah.
resources and community and people. And that's what's great about the doomer sites too, is that there's a real sense of community. I don't engage on the sites very often, but I do read a lot of the articles and things like that. And it's wonderful. You see the same kind of people posting,
Mhm.
you get to know them a little bit. We also went to a workshop with Carolyn Baker and Dean Walker and got to meet a lot of the doomers there, sort of loss of a loved one. And we've done through our research, we've realized that they're gateways. They're gateways to where you no longer have the luxury to look away. You realize how
Yeah.
hard life is and how precious it is and how much connection matters. And from that point forward, you can't turn back.
Yeah.
You've seen. And so you're right. I mean, folks who have faced abuse, folks who have battled depression or anxiety, these things that really make us confront the things we don't want to confront. And then once you realize that you can confront those hard things, you can't undo it, right? You can't go back to this luxurious life where this external world doesn't matter. Instead, everything matters, and you have to put everything in context, and you realize that connection is your way out of these really hard things.
Yep. That's what you realized.